guys, G-Economics here. Today bringing you hopefully a useful little video on the OCR GCE economics, so that's A2 economics, paper F584, which is the transport paper, and having a little look at the previous 3 sessions to see what has gone before in the exam papers, see if we can spot any trends in the data, and also see what might be the potential areas of assessment in the June 2016 paper. So if we look back on the previous sessions, so June 2013, which was on the UK bus market, that was the data response section of it. Areas of the specification which were assessed were barriers to entry, objectives of firms in the transport industry. Once again, asked to compare data, so as I've said in previous videos, make sure that when you're doing that you're calculating averages using terms like higher, lower, faster, slower, this type of thing. Asked to do a subsidy diagram, very straightforward question I think for an A2 paper. And then a comment and discuss question, which will always come at the end of the data question on the data response section. Comment on the extent to which local bus markets in the UK are oligopolies, so a nice market structures question. And then discuss the impact of increased competition on economic efficiency. Thereby you need to know obviously productive, allocative, Pareto, dynamic, static, all of the different types of efficiencies. And then these were the essay choices here. So of course you know that all of these questions, this takes us 25 marks, and then these 2 questions, 10, they take us 35, so we then end up with a paper which is out of 60 marks. So, analyse the reasons why traffic congestion is an example of market failure for part A, and then discuss the effectiveness of indirect taxation on fuel as a method of solving market failure in transport. That was one option. Analyse the reasons for growth in real passenger numbers in recent years, and discuss whether or not real privatisation in the UK has been a success or not, another option. And then final option, analyse, using examples, what is meant by sustainable air transport policy, and discuss whether or not the government should expand the road network in the UK. So those were our essay options in June 2013. June 2014 then, our case study material moved on somewhat. And let me just bring this back so that we're in focus. That's better. So June 2014 was on public and private sector investment in roads in Britain. And here in the data section we had to calculate a percentage. As I've said often, a calculator is essential, and obviously being able to calculate a percentage is essential. Identify an external benefit of expanding the UK road network. Define cost-benefit analysis, and then go on to discuss the problems associated with cost-benefit analysis. The differences associated with public versus private sector decision-making. Explain the term hypothecation, which you'll have come across in your studies of transport. Comment on the effectiveness of road tolls, and then discuss increasing the role of the private sector. So as our data questions and our essays were, analyse the level of economic efficiency achieved in the short run in a monopolistically competitive market. Note well, ladies and gentlemen, this says monopolistic, not monopoly. I remember very well a number of my candidates in this paper did this essay and wrote about monopoly, not monopolistic competition. And of course, when you start down that road, you're immediately heading towards disaster. So be very careful. Discuss the impact of a fall in market concentration on the economic efficiency of a transport market of your choice. And obviously, falling market concentration means it's becoming more competitive, and therefore you're moving from that sort of monopoly model, oligopolistic model, towards perfect competition. Nice question. Analyse negative externalities arising in transport markets, and discuss the effectiveness of using forecasts of transport trends to meet future needs and requirements of transport markets. Very popular question that on forecasting. Analyse barriers to entry in the UK transport market, and then discuss whether the UK government should raise indirect taxes such as APD, air passenger duty, on air travel in order to increase sustainability. So those were our options for June 2014, and then we're into June 2015. Case study data question was all about transport taxes, and areas of assessment in the data question were: identify reasons for a fall in the number of passengers using air transport, draw a tax diagram. So we've had a subsidy diagram previously, now we've got the tax diagram. Identify the arguments for and against air passenger duty. Comment on the usefulness of GDP data when forecasting demand. So here's another forecasting question. Discuss whether increasing competition in air transport is beneficial to customers. So again, another sort of competitive markets question. So that's the data questions, and then our essays last year were: analyse using examples why some transport markets are considered to be natural monopolies. Discuss whether or not the provision of high quality service for consumers should be the aim of firms in transport markets. So that's essay 1 option. Essay 2, analyse economies and diseconomies of scale which arise in transport markets, and discuss the extent to which UK freight transport is sustainable. And then finally, other than GDP, analyse factors which economists would consider when forecasting, here it is again, the demand for bus usage in the UK, and discuss the effectiveness of regulation and subsidies as policies to encourage more people to travel on public transport. Quite a nice little question. So that's the June 2015 paper, ladies and gents. You'll not find this on the OCR website. I'll put the link down below here to this paper and also the mark scheme for you to pick that up. So let's just have a look at the where the essay might actually focus in June 2016. If you look at your specification for transport, you'll see there are 4 sections. Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, Section 4. Having had a good look at this over the Easter holiday, most of the essay questions from June 13, 14 and 15 have tended to come from sections 1 and 2 of the specification. Now, of course, this is no foolproof solution here. I'm not telling you that this will be the questions because I didn't write the paper, but it would make sense therefore that maybe you're more likely to get essays from sections 3 and 4. So section 3, market failure and the role of intervention in transport markets, and section 4, transport economics and government policy. So if you look at the specification and you go through the specification on section 3, what you need to look out for are all of the candidates should be able to discuss. And that's what I've done. So I've pulled out all the things that you need to discuss under section 3. And these are certainly things which I feel you should be planning essay responses to for June 2016. Discuss the problems and implications of placing monetary values on negative externalities. Hasn't been on before. Discuss the role of indirect taxation in cases of market failure. Discuss the extent to which some modes of transport are more sustainable than others. Discuss the broad approaches for dealing with congestion. Discuss the extent to which road pricing is an effective way of dealing with market failure associated with traffic congestion. Discuss the impact on UK towns and cities and elsewhere in the world where road pricing schemes have been implemented. So, and elsewhere in the world, this is where you need to have more of a knowledge than just really what's in the textbook. And discuss using case studies of developed and emerging economies how other countries have sought to deal with the problems of urban traffic congestion. So those are areas certainly that I'm going to get my students to be prepping some answers, some bullet point answers in anticipation of a question on these particular areas. And then section 4 of the specification, discuss the limitations of the cost-benefit approach and recent modifications to the methodology. Discuss how the cost-benefit approach compares the private sector methods of appraisal. Discuss how the cost-benefit approach compares with private sector methods of appraisal. Discuss how transport policy seeks to deal with current transport problems and issues such as congestion in the UK and elsewhere. And elsewhere is the a key thing again. And then finally, discuss how transport policy can meet future needs and requirements, including recent EU policy initiatives in areas such as freight transport. So those are certainly, I think, worth giving a little bit more of your revision time to preparing the pros and cons, the arguments on one side and the other for each of these, and doing a little bit more research beyond simply what you know about the UK economy for some of these. I would also add that there is generally always some type of market structure question, so something on monopoly, oligopoly, monopolistic competition, perfect competition, contestable markets, which is my all-time favourite, I have to say. So also you need to be aware of the assumptions associated with all of those market structures, the diagrams that go alongside each of them, how to compare. I mean, generally speaking, the comparison will be monopoly, perfectly competitive market. And then obviously being able to compare all of the efficiencies, productive, allocative, static, dynamic, etc., etc. And in terms of focus for data response then, things which haven't really been assessed in the previous three sections would be these things. So being asked to define simply transport, to apply concentration ratios within the transport industry. You might be given a certain market and some data and asked to calculate it. Explain what's meant by economies and diseconomies of scale and how firms might be affected by these. Explain monopoly and monopolistic competition. Explain what's meant by contestability and the characteristics of a perfectly contestable market. Explain what's meant by deregulation and franchising. Explain the effects of the increased demand for road and air transport on the environment. Explain how and why economists seek to put a monetary value on these negative externalities. Explain why traffic congestion is a classic example of market failure. And explain what is meant by integration in transport policy. So those are the various sections which I think you ought to be considering when it comes to the data response section of this paper. And the final thing to say is really context, context, context. I've said this for 581, I've said it for 582, I will say it, and I've said it for 585. But when you're given these scenarios, case studies, make sure that you make your answer relevant to and responsive to the case study that you're actually being given. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen, on F584. I'll be back with various other bits and pieces on this in the weeks to come. So hope the revision's going well, and see you.